For decades, millions of Americans have built their entire retirement plans around one fundamental assumption: that the rules governing their pensions, taxes, and savings would remain reasonably stable after they had already spent years, sometimes entire careers, planning around them. A quiet but powerful decision from the Supreme Court has just shaken that assumption in a way almost no one expected. In a unanimous ruling, every single justice in agreement, the court decided something that could reshape retirement protections across the entire country. The decision didn't just settle a legal debate, it fundamentally changed how states are permitted to treat the financial promises that millions of people rely on when planning their retirement. And the surprising part is that most Americans haven't even heard about it yet. There were no dominating headlines, no weeks of political back and forth. Yet the implications of this ruling could reach into pensions, retirement taxes, and long-term savings plans for millions of people across all 50 states. I'm Zane, and welcome back to Senior Security Updates, where we break down the legal and financial developments that directly affect your retirement security, in plain language you can actually use. Today, we are going to walk through this Supreme Court decision step by step: what changed, why it matters, and what it could mean for your financial future. Why a unanimous ruling sends a different kind of signal. To understand why this decision carries so much weight, you first need to appreciate something that almost never happens at the Supreme Court anymore. Every single justice agreed. This was not a narrow 5-4 split where half the court strongly disagreed with the other half. It was a full 9-0 decision. Justices appointed by presidents from completely different political parties, all arriving at the same conclusion. In the legal world, that kind of unanimity sends a powerful message. It tells lower courts, state legislatures, and government agencies that the principle behind the decision is not a contested or temporary position. It is settled law. And when the Supreme Court speaks with that unified a voice, it typically creates a precedent that shapes how policies are written for decades to come. The core principle. What are reliance interests? The reason this ruling matters so deeply is because it centers around a concept the court described as fundamental reliance interests. That phrase sounds like dense legal language, but the meaning behind it is genuinely straightforward. The court recognized that when people make major long-term decisions based on laws that governments have already established, those decisions create legitimate expectations that deserve legal protection. Think about the kinds of choices people make when planning retirement. Someone might decide how much to save each year based on how their state treats retirement income for tax purposes. A public school teacher might accept a lower salary with the understanding that a defined pension formula will support them after decades of service. A retired couple might sell their home and relocate to a different state specifically because it advertises favorable tax treatment for pension income or Social Security benefits. None of those decisions happen quickly. They are built slowly, over years, sometimes over entire careers. And every one of them depends on the assumption that the rules guiding those decisions will remain reasonably consistent. What the Supreme Court said in this ruling is that those expectations are not simply personal hopes or financial guesses. They can carry constitutional significance. When a state creates laws that people reasonably rely on while planning their financial futures, the government cannot simply reverse course in a way that causes significant harm to those who built their plans around those rules. How the balance of power has shifted. Before this ruling, states generally had wide latitude to adjust retirement-related policies whenever budget pressures emerged. Legislatures could change how pension formulas worked, modify benefit calculations, or alter how retirement income was taxed. When individuals challenged those changes in court, they usually faced a steep uphill battle. The burden of proof fell on the retiree or worker to demonstrate that the government had acted improperly. For many people, the practical reality was that once a state decided to modify the rules, there was very little an individual could realistically do to stop it. This ruling shifts that dynamic in a very important way. Instead of forcing individuals to prove that a government change is unfair, the court's framework places significantly more responsibility on the state itself. When a policy change threatens to disrupt long-standing reliance interests, the government must now justify that decision under a much stricter constitutional standard. In simpler terms, the presumption now leans toward protecting the people who relied on the original rules. If a state wants to alter retirement laws in ways that affect people who planned their financial future around them, the state now has to explain why that change is necessary and why it outweighs the harm caused to those individuals. That shift, determining who carries the burden of proof, is one of the primary reasons legal analysts believe this decision could ripple across retirement systems, tax policies, and pension programs nationwide. Who benefits most from these new protections? While this ruling applies across the country, its real-world impact will be felt most strongly by certain groups. Here at Senior Security Updates, we want to be specific about who stands to gain the most meaningful protection. State and local government employees, teachers, firefighters, police officers, public health workers, city and county employees. Many of these individuals spend their careers in public service accepting lower salaries in exchange for the promise of a defined pension in retirement. Those pensions are built on specific formulas involving years of service and salary history. In the past, when states faced serious budget pressure, some lawmakers attempted to adjust those formulas, reducing cost of living adjustments, raising retirement ages, or modifying how benefits were calculated. What this ruling signals is that if someone spent years contributing to a pension system under a specific set of terms, the state may now face significant constitutional barriers before changing those terms in ways that harm existing workers and retirees. Retirees who relocated based on state tax policies. Every year, thousands of Americans move after retirement, sometimes to be near family, sometimes for climate and lifestyle, but very often because certain states advertise favorable tax treatment for retirement income. Some states do not tax pension income at all. Others provide exemptions for Social Security benefits or specific retirement account distributions. When someone makes a decision as significant as selling their home and crossing state lines in reliance on those tax policies, the reasoning behind this ruling suggests that a sudden reversal of those policies could now face meaningful constitutional challenge. Workers currently building retirement savings. Millions of Americans saving through 401k, 403b, and similar employer-sponsored accounts are also affected, particularly when state policies govern how that retirement income is treated upon distribution. If a state were to dramatically change how that income is taxed after people had spent decades contributing under a specific set of expectations, the new legal framework becomes directly relevant. Social Security recipients in states that tax benefits. A handful of states currently tax Social Security income. For retirees living in those states, even modest policy adjustments can significantly affect monthly budgets. If a state were to expand or introduce new taxes on Social Security in ways that materially harm retirees who structured their finances around previous laws, the reasoning in this decision could become a powerful legal tool. A real-world example: how this plays out in practice. To see how this protection might actually work, consider a straightforward scenario. Imagine someone who spent 30 years working and saving carefully. During that time, they research different states and find one that advertises significant tax advantages for retirees. Perhaps pension income is not taxed, or retirement benefits receive special exemptions. After reviewing those policies carefully, they decide to retire there. They sell their home, relocate, establish residency, and build their monthly budget around the understanding that their retirement income will not be taxed by the state. That is not a casual choice. It is a major life decision involving housing, healthcare providers, community relationships, and decades of financial planning. Now imagine that several years later, the state legislature faces a budget shortfall and introduces a new tax on retirement income. Under older legal interpretations, those retirees might have had limited ability to challenge that change. The state could simply argue that tax policy is always subject to revision. But under the framework described in this Supreme Court ruling, the situation may look very different. Those retirees could argue that they made a major financial and lifestyle decision in direct reliance on the state's earlier law, that their relocation, housing choices, and long-term budgeting were built around that promise. Courts may now require the state to demonstrate that its decision is justified despite the concrete harm caused to people who planned their lives around the previous rules. That possibility alone is why retirement policy experts, pension analysts, and legal scholars are paying close attention to this decision. The three-question framework courts will now use. The Supreme Court didn't simply introduce a broad principle and leave it undefined. The justices also outlined how courts should evaluate future cases where retirement laws are changed after people have already relied on them. Legal analysts describe this as a reliance impact analysis, and its structure is straightforward. Question 1. Did people actually rely on the existing law when making long-term decisions? In most retirement situations, this answer is relatively clear. Workers decide how much to contribute to retirement accounts, when they can afford to stop working, and where they will live based heavily on the legal conditions in place at the time. Someone who spends 20 or 30 years paying into a pension system under a specific formula is clearly relying on that structure. A retiree who relocates based on favorable tax policies is also relying on those policies. If that reliance can be demonstrated, it establishes the first element of the legal argument. Question 2. Does the government's new policy cause material financial harm? Minor administrative adjustments may not meet this threshold, but if a new policy reduces pension benefits, imposes unexpected taxes on retirement income, or significantly reduces someone's expected retirement income, the harm becomes easier to demonstrate. Question 3. Does the state have a sufficiently compelling reason to justify the change despite that harm? This is where many potential policy changes could face serious scrutiny. Simply saying that a state needs more revenue may not automatically justify rewriting rules that people depended on for decades. Courts could require a substantially stronger explanation before allowing those changes to stand. This combination of factors is what creates the new dynamic. Instead of retirees always being forced to prove the government acted improperly, the legal structure now asks the government to explain why it is justified in overriding the reliance people placed on earlier laws. What you should do right now. 3 practical steps. Understanding this ruling is valuable, but here at Senior Security Updates, Zane and the team always want to give you actionable guidance, not just information. Step 1. Document the rules you are currently relying on. This is the single most important practical step you can take, and it requires no legal expertise whatsoever. Visit your state's Department of Revenue website and locate the pages that explain how retirement income, pensions, and Social Security benefits are taxed in your state. Save a PDF copy or print those pages. That time-stamped document becomes a record of what the law said when you were making your planning decisions. Apply the same approach to pension enrollment materials, retirement account plan summaries, benefit statements, and any official correspondence from pension administrators or retirement plan providers. Each document helps establish the specific expectations that guided your financial decisions. If you relocated to a different state because of its retirement tax policies, keep records of that decision. Real estate transactions, financial planning notes, or any written guidance you reviewed at the time. When courts evaluate reliance interests, that broader context of your decisions matters. Step 2. Consult a qualified professional. Retirement law intersects with financial planning, tax policy, and estate planning in ways that can become complicated quickly. Speaking with a qualified financial planner, retirement specialist, or legal professional can help translate this Supreme Court decision into practical guidance specific to your situation. A professional in this field can help you identify which parts of your retirement strategy depend most heavily on current state policies, what records to preserve, and how to structure your planning so that your reliance on existing laws is clearly and consistently documented. This is general educational information. Please consult a qualified financial or legal professional for guidance specific to your personal situation. Step 3. Review your pension documents. carefully for public employees in particular, this step can be especially valuable. Reviewing pension plan documents, benefit formulas, and enrollment materials can clarify exactly what terms were in place when you entered the system. If those terms were ever altered in a way that reduced expected benefits, documentation showing what existed before the change could become highly relevant under this new legal framework. How states are likely to respond. This ruling does not end the conversation. In many respects, it begins a new phase. State governments rely heavily on their ability to adjust financial policies in response to budget pressures and long-term pension obligations. When a Supreme Court decision introduces stronger protections for reliance interests, lawmakers naturally begin looking for ways to work within those boundaries. Several strategies are already being discussed in policy circles. Grandfather clauses are one common approach. Under this model, existing workers and retirees continue operating under the original rules while employees hired after a certain date fall under a revised system. This attempts to change future obligations without disrupting the expectations of people who already relied on the earlier structure. Gradual phase-in strategies represent another approach. Instead of implementing a sudden change, a state might introduce adjustments slowly over many years, hoping that spreading changes over a longer timeline reduces demonstrable financial harm and improves the policy's chances of surviving legal scrutiny. Some states may simply pass reforms and allow courts to determine where the constitutional boundary lies, effectively using litigation as a testing mechanism for the limits of this ruling. Because the ruling is relatively new, the precise scope of these protections will likely be defined through future cases as different policies are challenged in court. That means the legal landscape surrounding retirement planning could continue evolving for years. The bigger picture: retirement as a two-way promise. As we step back and look at what this decision truly represents, there is a message that goes beyond legal theory. For generations, people have treated retirement planning as a personal promise, a commitment made to themselves and to their families through years of saving, working, and preparing. What this Supreme Court has effectively said is that when governments create laws that people rely on while making those plans, those laws carry their own kind of promise as well. They represent expectations that cannot be casually set aside after people have spent decades organizing their lives around them. Retirement planning is no longer just about saving money and choosing the right investments. It is also about staying aware of the laws and policies that shape how that retirement income will actually be treated, and understanding that those laws now carry a new level of constitutional weight when people have genuinely relied on them. Staying informed about proposed changes in your state's tax and pension policies is no longer just a matter of general awareness. It is an active component of protecting the financial plans you have spent decades building. Closing thoughts from Zane at Senior Security Updates. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you are subscribed to Senior Security Updates so you don't miss future updates as states begin responding to this ruling and new developments emerge. Share this with someone in your life who is approaching retirement or already relying on a pension, because many people are completely unaware that changes in retirement policy could directly affect their income. Simply passing along reliable, clearly explained information can make a meaningful difference for someone who needs it. And drop a comment below telling the Senior Security Updates team which state you live in and what aspect of your retirement planning concerns you most right now. Those perspectives genuinely shape the topics we cover next, because this channel exists to address what matters most to you. Staying informed is one of the most powerful tools available for protecting your financial future. And that is exactly what Senior Security Updates is here to help you do. This video is intended for general informational and educational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult a qualified professional for guidance specific to your personal situation and always verify information through official sources. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay protected, and we will see you in the next one, right here on Seniors Security Updates.